They say holding on is believing there's only a past. Letting go is knowing there's a future. But what if clinging to the wrong people isn't just delaying your growth? What if it's destroying your destiny? Many remain trapped in cycles of disappointment because they mistake familiarity for loyalty or presence for purpose. It is a dangerous illusion, and it often leads to spiritual decay, emotional exhaustion, and lost time, none of which you can afford. The message is subtle at first, an uneasy feeling, a recurring conflict, a peace that keeps escaping. Over time, the nudges get louder. You sense it during sleepless nights or in moments when silence screams louder than words. That's not anxiety, it's guidance. The universe does not whisper without meaning. It speaks, nudges, disrupts, and realigns. When it tells you to release someone, it's not rejection, it's redirection. There comes a moment in every soul's journey when discomfort is no longer a coincidence, but a signal. It begins quietly, an inexplicable heaviness after speaking with someone, an emotional fatigue that lingers longer than it should, a subtle inner conflict that words fail to name. You might brush it off at first, convincing yourself that every relationship has rough patches. But the truth doesn't stay hidden forever. It rises again and again in moments of silence, in dreams, in conversations that leave your spirit unsettled. This is not imagination, it's intuition, a sacred whisper from the universe urging you to listen. Not every connection is meant to last. Some people arrive as teachers, not companions. Others as mirrors, showing you the parts of yourself that still need healing. And when the purpose of that connection has been served, the energy begins to shift. Conversations feel forced, laughter becomes mechanical, and presence turns into obligation. You may find yourself shrinking in their presence, abandoning your values to maintain harmony or second-guessing your instincts just to avoid conflict. That isn't love, it's spiritual dissonance, and the longer you remain, the more distorted your perception becomes. Letting go of someone who once meant everything can feel like tearing flesh from bone, but holding on after the expiration of a bond is spiritual suffocation. The universe never asks for sacrifices that harm your soul. It invites you into transitions that renew it. Every repetition of conflict, every unresolved tension is a thread pulling at the edge of your peace. The longer you ignore it, the more tightly that thread winds around your future. Release, though painful, becomes the only form of self-preservation. To ignore these signals is to wander in circles emotionally, spiritually, energetically. Life becomes a pattern instead of a progression. You find yourself battling the same issue, but in different settings and with different faces. That's no longer coincidence. It's a reflection of what you've allowed. The universe doesn't force you to leave, but it will make staying increasingly uncomfortable. What doesn't support your expansion will slowly erode your essence until you make a choice, evolve or remain. Peace isn't found by avoiding discomfort, but by honoring the truth it reveals. Your soul was not designed to carry expired energy. When the tug becomes too strong to ignore, understand it for what it is, divine direction. The universe is not tearing you apart, it's unfolding you. Letting go is not abandonment of love, but the arrival of wisdom. And in that wisdom, you will find your next chapter clearer, lighter, and aligned with who you are becoming. After distance begins to grow between you and another, the void left behind is often filled with silence, not just the absence of words, but a deafening stillness that reveals more than any apology ever could. You wait hoping for recognition, for responsibility, for a sign that your feelings matter, but none comes. And it's in that waiting that the truth emerges. The lack of response, the lack of effort, the lack of presence, it's all communication. Silence in its own unyielding way speaks the language of priorities. A person who truly values your place in their life doesn't make you question it. They don't disappear in moments that demand presence. They don't deflect or grow cold when you express your hurt. Instead, they lean in, they engage, they reflect, they care. But when excuses become more frequent than understanding, and avoidance takes the place of empathy, the connection begins to fracture beneath the weight of emotional negligence. You begin to feel like a burden rather than a blessing. And that's the moment you must ask yourself, is this silence protecting your peace or is it erasing your voice? The universe often withdraws its energy from relationships long before you do. It removes the sense of joy, lowers the emotional resonance, and strips away the illusion of compatibility. All that remains is what's real. When someone no longer fights for a seat at your table, it's because they were never meant to stay for the full meal, and yet many remain at the door, knocking on a heart that has already chosen to close itself off. That knocking becomes desperation. That waiting becomes self-neglect. It's tempting to believe that things will return to how they once were. Nostalgia is a powerful illusion, especially when filtered through loneliness. But memory is not reality. A moment of kindness does not erase months of absence. A good day does not overwrite weeks of indifference. The longer you justify silence, the more you compromise your emotional integrity. And when communication dies, the relationship does too, slowly, quietly, inevitably. Choosing to walk away in the face of silence is not weakness, it is wisdom. It's the recognition that peace cannot thrive where presence is inconsistent. The universe is never and clear. When someone repeatedly shows you who they are through their absence, believe them. Your spirit is designed to be nourished, not questioned. And sometimes the only closure you need is the realization that your value does not require constant explanation. Once you've recognized the silence and accepted what it truly means, the next battle is often internal. Despite the clarity, despite the repeated signs, something in you still clings. You remember the laughter, the shared memories, the comfort of their presence before the distance grew. This emotional residue becomes difficult to wash away. And so you linger, not because they've asked you to, but because a part of you still believes you need them. Yet clinging to what no longer serves you doesn't keep you safe, it keeps you stuck. Every soul carries an energetic budget: time, attention, emotion. These are currencies of your spirit, and when you continue investing them into connections that yield no return, your inner world begins to suffer. Slowly, you start to feel depleted. Your goals feel harder to reach. Creativity becomes stagnant. Joy feels foreign. The weight of trying to maintain what's already broken pulls down every area of your life. Even your physical body begins to respond. Tension in the chest, knots in the stomach, fatigue that rest cannot fix. It's easy to mistake the familiarity of dysfunction for safety. At least you know what to expect, right? But comfort rooted in fear is a false refuge. There is a steep price to be paid for emotional compromise. You begin censoring your voice to avoid conflict. You rationalize mistreatment to preserve an illusion. And in doing so, you shrink your spirit to fit into a mold that was never designed for your expansion. The longer you do this, the more disconnected you become from your own needs. The cost doesn't stop there. Opportunities that were aligned with your higher path begin to pass you by. Relationships that could nourish your growth never reach you because your energetic field is too congested with outdated bonds. Even your ability to dream boldly begins to fade. The future looks blurry, not because it's uncertain, but because your present is clouded by what should have been released. The universe doesn't withhold blessings, it simply waits until you are ready to receive them. And readiness begins with release. You may not realize it now, but every time you choose to cling to someone misaligned, you are unconsciously agreeing to delay your next breakthrough. Life does not wait indefinitely. Your higher path requires space. Space to realign, to renew, to recreate. And that space cannot exist while you are emotionally entangled with someone who drains rather than contributes. The hidden cost of clinging is not just emotional, it's spiritual. It's the erosion of your potential. Healing starts the moment you stop defending what has already collapsed. It continues as you reclaim your energy. As you turn your focus inward and begin asking better questions. Who am I without them? What have I been tolerating in the name of love? What possibilities have I been too afraid to chase? As these questions emerge, so too does your freedom. The cost of clinging may be high, but the reward of release is greater. And the universe is always prepared to repay, with abundance, what you've sacrificed in faith. After acknowledging the toll of emotional clinging, what remains is often the false security that made the attachment so hard to break in the first place. You tell yourself, at least I know what to expect, but predictability is not peace, it's simply a cage built from routine. A cage where your spirit forgets how to stretch and your dreams are quietly smothered by the weight of false comfort. That illusion of safety is perhaps the most dangerous part of all. Familiarity is seductive because it mimics stability. You know their habits, their moods, their cycles, and in that knowing there's control. But spiritual evolution is not built in places of control. It thrives in uncertainty, in expansion, in the surrender to something greater. When you stay in a relationship out of fear of the unknown, you are mistaking stagnation for strength. And no matter how gentle the decline, what decays cannot sustain your growth. The mind often resists change even when the heart has already let go. This resistance shows up as doubt. What if I'm making a mistake? Or what if I never find someone else? But these questions are rooted in scarcity, not truth. The universe doesn't ask you to walk into darkness. It asks you to walk through it. What lies on the other side isn't emptiness. It's expansion, stillness, clarity, the kind you forgot existed because you've grown used to noise. Think of the soul like a river. When the water is dammed by fear, it stagnates, grows murky, and loses its current. But once the dam is lifted, once the illusion of safety is broken, the water rushes forward. That rush may feel chaotic at first, but it's movement, it's momentum, you're flowing again. That's what healing feels like, not immediate comfort, but restored motion. Forward energy returning to a life that had grown still. Safety in the wrong hands often becomes control. Some relationships aren't safe. They're familiar systems of quiet manipulation, subtle guilt trips, emotional gaslighting, conditional affection. These patterns become so normalized that anything healthier feels foreign. You may even start to confuse genuine care for obligation. But real safety doesn't silence you, it doesn't make you smaller. It doesn't ask you to sacrifice your values for temporary peace. The universe is not calling you out of connection, it's calling you into alignment. And alignment means being surrounded by people who challenge you to rise, not shrink. It means existing in spaces where you are seen, not just used. Letting go of the illusion of safety isn't about walking into loneliness. It's about walking into freedom. It's about choosing trust over fear. It's about understanding that the path forward often requires an empty road before it reveals the right companions. And so the illusion must be shattered before truth can be built. What felt like safety was simply familiarity rehearsing itself. What seemed like protection was really avoidance in disguise. But now the curtain is pulled back and the stage is set for something real. You don't need to rehearse your worth anymore. You don't need to play a role in someone else's comfort zone. You are allowed to choose authenticity over approval. And in doing so, you allow the universe to meet you where you truly are, unmasked, unafraid, and finally ready. Once the illusion of safety dissolves, the terrain beneath your feet begins to feel different, lighter, unfamiliar, yet unmistakably real. You've stopped rehearsing your worth, and the act has ended. Now, for the first time in a long while, space surrounds you. Space once occupied by mismatched connections, constant noise, and the weight of others' expectations. This is the sacred moment when alignment begins to stir. Like a compass finally freed from interference, your inner needle starts to point true north. It arrives quietly like sunlight seeping through the cracks of a long-sealed window. Alignment isn't a dramatic event. You begin to notice that peace becomes your baseline, not a reward after conflict. Your thoughts gain clarity, the air around you feels less dense, and as you become more attuned to your own energy, you also become more selective, less tolerant of what once drained you, more aware of what feeds your soul. The universe doesn't just ask for release to create emptiness, it clears the field to plant precision. People begin to appear not by chance, but by resonance. Conversations emerge that feel like mirrors. Ideas flow where there was once resistance. In these moments, you realize that true connection never needed effort drenched in anxiety. It needed authenticity and a willingness to wait for what fit, not force what didn't. What once felt like luck now looks like design. That's alignment, not chasing, but attracting, not negotiating your values, but living so fully in them that only what echoes them can remain. And it's not just people who change, it's your life's entire rhythm. Decisions feel less like dilemmas and more like recognition. You don't just stumble into opportunities, you walk into them with clear footsteps, guided by a steady inner pulse. Because when your internal world is clean, uncluttered by outdated attachments, the external world reflects it. Your surroundings become a projection of your clarity. Even setbacks take on a different tone. They no longer destroy your balance, they refine your trajectory. Alignment does not mean ease at every turn. In fact, its early stages are often marked by silence and solitude. But there's a difference between being alone and being aligned. One leaves you longing for anything that fills the void. The other fills you from within. You stop mistaking movement for progress. You stop needing noise to feel significant. Your presence in its rawest state becomes enough. And from that enoughness, everything else flows. The universe honors those who honor themselves. When you protect your peace, elevate your standards, and listen to the signals it has always been sending, you enter a partnership with life itself. It responds not with noise, but with clarity. It sends people who reflect your growth, not your wounds. It opens doors that match your frequency. It reveals paths that you were too entangled to notice before. All of this begins with one truth. Alignment is not found. It's allowed by letting go of what never fit. And so alignment becomes the new foundation. Not perfection, not certainty, but honesty. You no longer beg for peace, you embody it. You no longer chase purpose, you live aligned with it. The universe has not been punishing you with closed doors. It has been patiently waiting for you to stop forcing them open. When you finally do, what walks through the open ones will feel nothing like the past. It will feel like home because it will be. In conclusion, letting go is never a passive act. It is a conscious decision to choose truth over illusion, alignment over attachment, and future over familiarity. It demands courage not just to walk away from someone but to walk toward yourself, toward the life waiting on the other side of your release. The universe has not led you through all this pain to abandon you in it. Every quiet nudge, every restless night, every moment of clarity was a message. You were never meant to shrink in the presence of others just to feel accepted. You were meant to expand, to evolve, to rise. When you let go of the wrong people, you make space for everything right to arrive. That space is sacred. It is not empty. It is preparation. You are not starting over. You are starting aligned. And in that alignment, new relationships, new visions, and new opportunities begin to take root. The universe never leaves you in loss without planting the seed of a greater gain. But that seed requires soil cleared of weeds, of noise, of compromise. What seems like detachment is in truth divine architecture, the restructuring of your life in a way that finally honors who you really are. Back for validation or closure. The closing of one chapter is the sacred beginning of another. Trust the shift, honor the signs. Know that walking away is not abandonment. It is obedience to the call of your higher self. And in that obedience, everything you thought you lost will return in a form you never imagined, freer, fuller, and finally in tune with you.